The vampire king's daughter kept crying in the court until the waitress said, "She just needs a mum. She just needs a mum." The words were spoken softly, barely a whisper over the rim of a silver tray, yet they severed the tension in the grand hall like a guillotine blade dropping through silk. The High Council froze. The immortal guards' hands drifted to their hilts. At the center of the obsidian dais, the sobbing had stopped, not because the child was soothed, but because the air had been sucked out of the room by the sheer audacity of the interruption. Holden Davenport, king of the night, slowly turned his head. His eyes, usually the color of frozen violets, burned with a predatory, lethal focus. He looked past the duchesses, dripping in rubies, past the generals in their iron-weave armor, and fixed his gaze on the trembling waitress in the stained apron who had dared to speak. "What?" Holden asked, his voice a low rumble of thunder. "Did you just say to me?" The girl didn't retreat. That was the first surprise. The second was that the little girl in his arms reached out her tiny, pale hand toward the waitress, and finally, miraculously, took a breath. The Crimson Gala was not a place for the living. It was a diplomatic necessity, a biannual convergence where the fragile truce between the human coalition and the vampire dominion was toasted with vintage wines and synthetically enriched blood. Serena Marston knew the rules. Keep your head down, keep the champagne flutes full, and never, under any circumstances, make eye contact with a creature whose heart beat once for every 10 of yours. The ballroom of the Hotel Obsidian was a cavern of gold leaf and velvet. Chandeliers dripped crystals like frozen tears, casting prismatic light over a crowd that was terrifyingly beautiful. The vampires moved with fluid, liquid grace, their skin alabaster smooth, their smiles sharp. Serena tightened her grip on her serving tray, her knuckles white. She needed this paycheck. Her rent was 3 weeks late, and her landlord, Mr. Henderson, had stopped accepting apologies in lieu of cash. Then the doors blew open. It wasn't a wind that did it, but a force of presence. The temperature in the room plummeted 10 degrees in a heartbeat. The music, a string quartet playing Mozart, strangled into silence. Holden Davenport strode in. He was taller than the tabloids suggested, broad-shouldered in a suit cut from midnight blue silk. His face was a map of cold aristocracy, high cheekbones and a jawline that could cut glass. But it was his chaotic energy that terrified the room. He wasn't walking with regal composure. He was pacing, agitated, his movements jagged. And in his arms, clinging to the lapel of his jacket like a drowning sailor to driftwood, was a child. She couldn't have been more than 5. A mass of dark curls, a dress of expensive lace that was rumpled and tear-stained, and a pair of lungs that were currently shredding the sophisticated silence of the gala. "No, no, I want to go home." The wail was high-pitched, piercing. To human ears it was annoying. To vampire ears, sensitive enough to hear a heartbeat across a room, it must have been agony. Serena saw the cringe ripple through the crowd. Duchesses pressed perfumed handkerchiefs to their ears. Generals hissed, their fangs slipping from their sheaths in involuntary irritation. "Elodie, please," Holden muttered, his voice strained. He looked exhausted. Dark circles bruised the skin beneath his eyes, a sign of a vampire pushed to his limit. "Elodie, silence! We are in public!" "I hate it! It's cold! It's loud!" the child shrieked, kicking her patent leather shoes against the king's chest. A woman stepped forward from the crowd. It was Clarissa Radcliffe. Serena recognized her from the society pages, ambitious, cruel, and stunningly beautiful in a dress that looked like spilled blood. "Your Majesty," Clarissa purred, stepping into Holden's path. "The child is distressed. Perhaps she requires discipline, or Removal. She is disturbing the peace. Holden looked at Clarissa with open loathing. She is my heir, Clarissa, not a dog to be put in a kennel. She is a half-breed, Clarissa whispered, though in the silence it carried like a shout. Unstable. Perhaps if I took her— "No!" Elodie screamed, burying her face in Holden's neck. The sound shattered a champagne flute on a nearby table. The tension was a physical weight. The vampires were losing patience. The predator instinct was surfacing. Agitation in the room was triggering their hunger. Serena saw the eyes of a nearby guard turn entirely black. Violence was seconds away. Serena didn't think. She didn't calculate the risk. She just felt a tug in her chest, a familiar ache she hadn't felt since her younger sister passed away years ago. She saw a father who was drowning and a child who was terrified. She stepped out of the shadows of the service alcove. She walked right past the shimmering barrier of security, right past Clarissa Radcliffe, and stopped 3 feet from the Vampire King. "She's overstimulated," Serena said. The room gasped. It was a collective intake of breath that sounded like a vacuum sealing. Holden froze. He looked down at her. For a second, Serena thought he might kill her right there. His eyes were ancient, terrifying voids. "Excuse me?" "The lights," Serena said, her voice shaking, but her hands steady as she set her tray down on a side table. "The perfume in this room, the noise, it's too much for her senses. She's half vampire, isn't she? That means she hears everything 10 times louder. But she has a human child's emotional regulation. She's in pain." Clarissa laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. "And who is this? The kitchen help has an opinion on royal biology?" Serena ignored her. She looked directly at Elodie. The little girl had stopped screaming, hiccuping into silence, peering at Serena with one wet, violet eye. "Hey there," Serena said softly. She reached into her apron pocket, a violation of protocol, and pulled out a small, crinkled packet of honey-roasted peanuts. It was her own snack for later. "I bet everyone keeps trying to feed you red stuff, huh?" Elodie sniffled. She nodded slowly. "Gross," Serena whispered conspiratorially. "I have peanuts, and I know a song about a spider who wears rain boots. Want to hear it?" Holden looked like he had been struck by lightning. He stood paralyzed as this human, this insignificant waitress with messy brown hair and a uniform that was 2 sizes too big, reached out. Elodie hesitated. Then slowly, she released her death grip on her father's coat. She reached for the peanuts. "Rain boots," Elodie whispered. "Bright yellow ones," Serena smiled. It was a warm smile, genuine and devoid of the sycophantic fear everyone else wore. She has not eaten in 3 days," Holden said, his voice sounding strange, hollow. "She refuses the synthesis." "Because she wants comfort food," Serena said, glancing up at the king. "She doesn't need a doctor, and she definitely doesn't need discipline." She looked at Clarissa then, finally acknowledging the vampiress with a look of defiance that was borderline suicidal. Then she looked back to Holden. "She just needs a mum." The silence that followed was absolute. Holden stared at her. He looked at his daughter, who was now tearing open the peanut packet with clumsy fingers, the screaming fit entirely forgotten. He looked back at Serena. The lethal edge in his eyes softened into something far more dangerous. Obsession. "What is your name?" Holden asked. "Serena. Serena Marston." Holden nodded, once, slowly. He adjusted his grip on Elodie, shielding her from the room, but he didn't step away from Serena. "Redwood," he called out without looking away. A shadow detached itself from the wall. A massive man, silent as a monolith, appeared. "Sire." "Cancel my meetings," Holden said. Prepare the car." "Yes, sire. Shall I have security escort the girl out?" Holden looked at Serena. He looked at her neck, pulsing with terrified life, and then at her hands, which had just performed a miracle he couldn't replicate. "No," Holden said darkly. "Pack her things. She's coming with us." Serena blinked. "Wait. What? No, I have a shift. I have a cat. I can't—" "You just quieted the Princess of the Dominion when the entire High Council failed," Holden said, turning on his heel, signaling the end of the conversation. "You are no longer a waitress, Miss Marston. You are employed by the Crown." "I didn't apply for a job," Serena called after him, panic rising in her throat. Holden paused at the double doors. He glanced back, a faint, terrifying smirk touching his lips. "I don't recall asking for an application." The car was silent, smooth, and cost more than the entire neighborhood Serena grew up in. It glided through the rainy streets of the city, the tinted windows turning the neon lights of downtown into smeared streaks of grey ghost light. Serena sat on the far side of the leather bench seat, pressing herself against the door. Across from her, Elodie had fallen asleep instantly, her head resting on Holden's lap. The king was staring out the window, one hand absently stroking his daughter's hair. His fingers were long, pale, and ringed with silver. Serena's heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Kidnapped. She had been effectively kidnapped by the most powerful predator on the continent. "Stop thinking so loudly," Holden said. He didn't turn his head. "It's giving me a headache." "I'm not thinking," Serena snapped, her fear momentarily eclipsed by indignation. "I'm hyperventilating. There's a difference." Holden turned then. The interior of the car was dim, lit only by the passing street lamps, casting his angular features into sharp relief. Up close, he was devastating. There was a timelessness to his face, a beauty that was fundamentally inhuman. "You are safe, Serena," he said. The way he said her name, rolling the R slightly, sent a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. "I do not harm those under my protection." "Am I under your protection? Or am I a prisoner? That depends on how well you behave." "I have a life," Serena insisted, though her voice wavered. "I can't just disappear. My landlord—" "Is being paid," Holden cut in. "Redwood handled it before we left the curb. Your debt is cleared. Your cat, Mittens, is being collected by my staff and will be waiting for you at the estate." Serena's mouth fell open. You stole my cat. I relocated your familiar to ensure your comfort." "He's not a familiar. He's a tabby with a weight problem." For a fleeting second, a spark of amusement lit Holden's violet eyes. It transformed his face, making him look 5 years younger and infinitely less terrifying. "Regardless, you are here because you possess a skill I lack." He looked down at Elodie. The affection in his gaze was raw, painful to witness. It was the look of a man watching a sandcastle crumble while he tried to hold back the tide. "She has not slept more than an hour at a time for 6 months, Holden admitted quietly. The confession seemed to cost him. Since her mother left. The word left hung heavy in the air. In the vampire world, left could mean died, fled, or was executed. "She is half human," Holden continued. "The vampire nature within her fights the human fragility. She is in constant sensory overload. The healers offer sedatives. The witches offer binding spells. You offered peanuts." "She just wanted to be normal," Serena said softly. The anger drained out of her, replaced by that treacherous empathy that always got her into trouble. "You're a king. Everyone treats her like an heir, a symbol. She's just a kid who misses her mum." Holden's jaw tightened. The temperature in the car dropped again. "Her mother is a topic we do not discuss." The car slowed, turning off the highway onto a private road paved with dark cobblestones. They passed through massive iron gates wrought in the shape of twisting thorns. Ahead, looming against the stormy sky, was Davenport Manor. It wasn't a house. It was a Gothic cathedral of stone and glass. Spires pierced the clouds, gargoyles perched on the eaves, and Serena had the distinct, unsettling feeling that they were watching the car approach. "Welcome home," Holden murmured. The car stopped. The door was opened by Redwood, the giant guard who had driven them. He looked like he was carved from granite, with a buzz cut, and eyes hidden behind dark, tactical glasses. "We have arrived, sire. Daphne is waiting in the nursery." Holden scooped the sleeping Elodie up with effortless strength. He stepped out, and Serena followed, her legs wobbling. The entrance hall was vast enough to park a jumbo jet in. A double staircase swept up to the shadows. Portraits of stern-faced ancestors lined the walls, their eyes following Serena as she walked. "Redwood will show you to your quarters," Holden said, turning toward the stairs. "You start immediately. Your primary duty is Elodie's emotional state. If she cries, you fix it. If she sleeps, you watch her." "Wait," Serena called out. Holden paused on the third step. "What happens if I fail?" she asked. "What happens if I can't stop the crying?" Holden looked down at her. The amusement was gone. The king was back. "Do not fail, Serena. For both our sakes." He vanished up the stairs, leaving her alone with the silent giant. "This way, Miss Marston," Redwood grunted. He led her through a maze of corridors. The house was cold. It smelled of ozone, old paper, and something metallic, like blood dried on iron. "Is he always like that?" Serena asked, hugging her arms around herself. "The king carries the weight of the dominion," Redwood said, his voice flat. "And the grief of a father. Do not judge what you do not understand." They stopped at a heavy oak door. Redwood opened it to reveal a suite that was larger than Serena's entire apartment. A canopy bed, a fireplace roaring with magical, smokeless fire, and a basket in the corner where Mittens was currently sleeping on a silk pillow. "The nursery is the adjoining door," Redwood pointed to a door on the left. "Do not wander the west wing at night. The king hunts in the gardens. Stay inside." With that cheery advice, he closed the door. The lock clicked. Serena rushed to the window. It overlooked a sprawling garden of black roses and weeping willows. In the distance, she saw the silhouette of the city. Millions of lights. Freedom. But here, the shadows were long and deep. She checked the door to the nursery. It was unlocked. She pushed it open slowly. The room was a wonderland of toys. Antique dolls, rocking horses, towers of blocks, but the windows were barred with silver. Elodie was in a massive bed, tucked in, awake. Her violet eyes were wide open in the dark. "You stayed," the child whispered. Serena walked over and sat on the edge of the bed. "I didn't have much choice, kiddo." Elodie reached out and touched Serena's hand. Her skin was cool, like polished stone. "You have to be careful." "Of your dad?" Elodie shook her head. "No. Daddy is sad. You have to be careful of the Red Lady." "Clarissa?" Serena asked. "She wants to be mummy," Elodie whispered, her voice trembling. "But she smells like rust, and when she smiles, her shadow has teeth." A chill that had nothing to do with the drafty castle swept through Serena. She squeezed Elodie's hand. "Don't worry," Serena lied, trying to sound brave. "I'm good with teeth. I used to work at a diner where the truckers didn't tip. I can handle a lady in a red dress." Elodie didn't smile. She just looked at the door behind Serena. "She's listening," Elodie breathed. Serena spun around. The doorway was empty, but on the floor, just inside the threshold, lay a single, long-stemmed red rose. Its petals were withered, black at the edges, as if burnt by a touch. Morning in the vampire court did not begin with sunlight. It began with the slow, grudging retreat of the shadows. The heavy velvet curtains in the nursery were drawn tight, blocking out the lethal UV rays, leaving the room in a permanent, amber-hued twilight. Serena had barely slept. Every creak of the manor house sounded like footsteps. Every gust of wind sounded like a whisper. She was currently sitting on the floor, engaged in a high-stakes tea party with Elodie and a collection of stuffed bears. "Mr. Fluffernutter takes 2 sugars," Elodie instructed seriously. She looked better today. The dark circles under her eyes had faded slightly, and she was wearing a yellow dress that Serena had found in the closet, replacing the stiff black lace morning clothes the staff had laid out. "2 sugars for the bear, got it," Serena said, pouring imaginary tea from a porcelain pot. The door to the nursery swung open without a knock. It wasn't Holden. It was a woman Serena hadn't met, flanked by 2 others who looked like they stepped out of a fashion magazine for the undead. The woman in the lead was striking, short platinum hair, sharp features, and wearing a suit that cost more than a car. She held a tablet and looked at Serena with the clinical detachment of a scientist examining a microbe. "So," the woman said, "this is the pet." Serena stood up, brushing imaginary crumbs from her jeans. "I'm the nanny." "And you are?" "Cassandra Fleetwood, Chief of Protocol for the House of Davenport." She tapped her tablet. "You are not in uniform." "I wasn't given one." "We don't give uniforms to livestock," a voice drawled from the hallway. Clarissa Radcliffe glided into the room. If she looked dangerous at the gala, she looked lethal now. She wore a riding habit of crimson velvet, a riding crop tapping rhythmically against her thigh. Elodie instantly scrambled behind Serena, clutching Serena's leg. "Good morning, Princess," Clarissa cooed. The smile didn't reach her eyes. "Hiding behind the servants? How common." "Leave her alone," Serena said. Her voice was steady, surprising herself. "She's playing." Clarissa stepped closer. She smelled of expensive orchids and old blood. She towered over Serena. "Let's be clear, little mouse," Clarissa whispered. "You are a novelty. Holden is amused by you for the moment because you quieted the brat. But a novelty fades, and when it does, you will be nothing more than a calorie count in a skirt." "Is that a threat?" Serena asked. "It's a forecast." Clarissa reached out a gloved hand to touch Elodie's hair. Smack! Serena slapped the hand away. The sound echoed in the room like a gunshot. Cassandra gasped. The other courtiers froze. "You did not touch a high-born vampire. You certainly didn't slap one." Clarissa stared at her hand, then at Serena. Her face contorted, the beautiful mask slipping to reveal the monster beneath. Her upper lip curled back, revealing needle-sharp fangs. A low, guttural growl vibrated in her chest. "You mistake your position," Clarissa hissed. She raised the riding crop, the leather tip weighted with silver. "Stop." The command came from the doorway. It was quiet, but it carried the weight of a mountain. Holden stood there. He was dressed casually, a black sweater and slacks, but the air around him distorted, rippling with raw power. He didn't look at Clarissa. He looked at Elodie, who was shaking behind Serena. "Daddy!" Elodie cried, running past Serena to hug his legs. Holden placed a hand on her head, but his eyes were locked on Clarissa. "Did you just raise a weapon in my daughter's nursery?" "The human was insolent," Clarissa said, lowering the crop but keeping her chin high. "She struck me." "She defended my heir," Holden corrected. He walked into the room, the temperature dropping with every step. He stopped inches from Clarissa. "Serena Marston is under the king's grace." "Do you know what that means, Clarissa?" Clarissa paled. It means to touch her is to touch the crown. Correct. If she trips and scrapes her knee, I will hold you responsible. If she gets a paper cut, I will take a finger from your hand. Holden's voice was conversational, which made it infinitely more terrifying. Now get out! Clarissa glared at Serena with pure, undiluted hatred, then turned and swept out of the room, her entourage scrambling after her. Cassandra Fleetwood lingered for a moment, eyeing Serena with a new expression. Not contempt, curiosity. Then she bowed and left. The room fell silent. Nice friends you got, Serena muttered, her heart still racing. Holden sighed, rubbing his temples. He looked exhausted again. He swayed slightly on his feet. Are you okay? Serena asked, stepping forward. Holden leaned against the heavy oak dresser. His skin was grey, the veins beneath his eyes dark purple. I am fine. You're not. You look like you're about to pass out. It is. Merely a fast, Holden said, his voice tight. A fast? Why? Because, Elodie piped up, still holding his leg. Daddy won't drink the red juice anymore, not since Mommy. Serena looked at him. You're starving yourself. The synthetic blood is ash in my mouth, Holden admitted, closing his eyes. And I will not hunt humans. I made a vow. So you're just going to wither away? Leave Elodie alone with her? Serena pointed at the door where Clarissa had exited. Holden opened his eyes. The violet irises were blown wide, black pupils swallowing the colour. He was in a state of bloodlust, barely holding it back. He looked at Serena, really looked at her, and she realized how close she was standing. She could smell the scent of him, rain and cedar. He could undoubtedly smell the blood rushing in her veins. I am in control, Holden rasped. You're shaking, Serena observed. She did something then that she couldn't explain. Maybe it was the adrenaline. Maybe it was destiny. She reached out and took his hand. His skin was ice cold. You need to eat, she said. I cannot. Then you'll die, and Elodie will be an orphan. Is that the plan? Holden gripped her hand. He pulled her a step closer. The hunger in his face was terrifying, raw, and desperate. But beneath it was a profound sadness. You do not know what you are asking, he whispered, leaning down. His face was inches from her neck. Serena held her breath. She didn't pull away. Sire! Redwood burst into the room. Holden snapped back, releasing Serena's hand as if it had burned him. He stumbled back, his chest heaving. What is it? Holden barked, his voice turning savage. A message from the border, Redwood said, keeping his eyes averted from the intimate scene he had just interrupted. They found something. In the wreckage of the Queen's carriage. Holden stiffened. The hunger vanished, replaced by a cold, sharp intensity. Bring it to my study. He looked at Serena one last time. His expression was unreadable, a mix of shame and longing. Stay in the nursery, he ordered, and lock the door. He swept out, leaving Serena standing in the middle of the room, her hand still tingling where he had touched it. What did they find? Elodie asked, tugging on Serena's jeans. Serena looked down at the little girl, a knot of dread forming in her stomach. I don't know, sweetie, Serena whispered. But I have a feeling it changes everything. She went to the door to lock it, as ordered. But as she reached for the bolt, she saw something under the hallway carpet. A slip of paper, shoved hastily under the door during the confrontation. She picked it up. It was a note, written in elegant, jagged script. Run while you can, little mouse. The king doesn't just need a nanny. He needs a sacrifice to break the curse. Serena stared at the note. Then she looked at the lock. She turned it, the metal bolt sliding home with a heavy thud. She was trapped. And the king was starving. The lock clicked shut, but the sound didn't make Serena feel safe. It felt like the final nail in a coffin. She spent the next hour pacing the nursery, while Elodie constructed a complex fortress out of wooden blocks. The note. He needs a sacrifice to break the curse. Burned in Serena's pocket. Was she the sacrifice, or was she just bait? "Daddy is sad because of the bad magic," Elodie said suddenly, placing a block on a precarious tower. Serena stopped pacing. "What bad magic, Ellie?" "The magic that made Mommy go away. The magic that makes him hungry, but he can't eat." Elodie looked up, her eyes ancient and knowing. "He's fading, Serena, like a picture left in the sun." Before Serena could answer, the nursery door rattled. Not a knock, but a heavy thud, as if something large had leaned against it. "Miss Marston?" Redwood's voice came through the wood, gruff but strained. "The king requests your presence in the library." Serena opened the door. Redwood stood there, looking more like a statue than a man, but there was tension in his jaw. Is he okay?" "He is stable," Redwood said, which wasn't a yes. "Bring the girl. He refuses to be separated from her." They walked through the manor. The atmosphere had shifted. Servants scurried with heads bowed, whispering in hushed, fearful tones. The air smelled of ozone and impending violence. The library was a 2-story cavern of books, smelling of old paper and leather. But the center of the room was dominated by a large mahogany desk covered in debris. Shattered wood, twisted metal, and a piece of fabric that looked like torn silk. Holden stood by the fireplace, his back to them. He had changed into a crisp white shirt, but the sleeves were rolled up, revealing forearms that looked tense, the muscles coiled. "Daddy!" Elodie ran to him. Holden turned, catching her easily. He held her close, burying his face in her hair for a moment before looking at Serena. His eyes were clearer now. The terrifying black hunger receded to a simmer of violet. "Thank you for coming," he said formally. "Redwood made it sound like I didn't have a choice," Serena said, crossing her arms. "What is all this?" She gestured to the debris on the desk. "Remnants," Holden said, walking over to the desk, carrying Elodie. "Of the carriage my wife was in when she vanished." "Vanished?" Serena frowned. "I thought she died." "We found no body, only blood." "Too much blood." Holden picked up the piece of torn silk. "For 6 months, I believed she was attacked by the human resistance. That is why the treaty is so fragile. That is why I have been struggling. But this," Holden pointed to a piece of charred wood, "this scorch mark, it is not fire, it is necrotic magic, vampire magic." Serena felt a chill. "You think one of your own people did it?" "I think," Holden said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "that someone wanted to remove the Queen to clear a path to the throne. And now that Elodie is the only obstacle—" "Clarissa!" Serena breathed. Holden didn't confirm it, but his silence was answer enough. "The curse Elodie mentioned," he said, looking at Serena. "It is not a fairy tale. The necrotic residue, it poisons the bloodline. It is why I cannot feed. The synthetic blood offers no sustenance because the curse rejects it. I am starving because my own magic is turning against me." Serena stepped closer, drawn by the raw vulnerability in this powerful creature. "So how do you break it?" Holden looked at her. The intensity of his gaze made her breath hitch. "The ancient texts say, a curse of blood must be broken by a bond of blood. But not violence. Then what?" "A bond of trust," Holden said softly. "Freely given." He reached out, his fingers brushing a stray lock of hair from Serena's cheek. The touch was electric. "You are the first human Elodie has trusted in 6 months. You are the first thing in this castle that feels warm. "Sire," Redwood interrupted from the doorway, his hand on his earpiece. "Lady Clarissa is demanding entry. She has the council with her." Holden's face hardened, the tender moment shattered. "She moves quickly," Holden muttered. He looked at Serena. "Stay here. Stay out of sight." "No," Serena said, surprising herself. "She's a bully. If I hide, she wins. Besides, I'm the nanny. I go where Elodie goes." Holden looked at her, a flicker of admiration warring with his protective instinct. "Very well, but stay behind me." The High Council had convened in the Great Hall. 12 ancient vampires, draped in velvet and apathy, sat around a long obsidian table. Clarissa stood at the head, looking triumphant. When Holden entered, flanked by Redwood, and with Serena holding Elodie's hand a step behind, the room went silent. "You look unwell, my king," Clarissa said, her voice dripping with faux concern. "Perhaps the burden of rule is becoming too heavy?" "My health is not the agenda, Clarissa," Holden said, taking his seat at the head of the table. He didn't sit, he lounged, projecting a lazy power he didn't feel. "Speak your piece." "We are concerned about the heir," Clarissa gestured to Elodie. "She is being raised by a human servant, a waitress. It is an insult to our heritage, and it is dangerous. The child is half human. She needs to learn to suppress that side, not indulge it with peanut butter and lullabies." "Elodie is happy," Holden said coldly. "For the first time in months." "She is weak," Clarissa snapped. "And so are you. We smell it, Holden. You haven't fed. You are wasting away. A starving king cannot protect the Dominion." She slammed a document onto the table. "The council proposes a regency. I will take custody of Elodie. I will raise her as a proper vampire. And you will step down until your illness passes." Serena watched Holden's hands curl into fists. He was weak. If he fought them now, he might lose. And if he lost, Serena stepped forward. "He's not starving," she lied. Her voice rang clear through the hall. Every eye turned to her. "Excuse me?" Clarissa laughed. "The pet speaks?" "He's not starving," Serena repeated, walking up to the table. She could feel the predators watching her, feel their hunger. "He's fasting. It's a ritual. For the queen." "A ritual?" An elder vampire raised an eyebrow. "I know of no such ritual." "It's an ancient one," Serena improvised wildly, her heart hammering against her ribs. "A cleansing, to prepare for the bonding of the heir's guardian." Holden looked at her, his eyes wide. He stayed silent, letting her play this dangerous game. "I am not just a waitress," Serena said, standing tall. "I am Elodie's chosen guardian, and the king is fasting to purify his magic so he can bind my service to the line." "Absurd," Clarissa hissed. "A human guardian?" "Is it?" Serena challenged. "Elodie is half human. Only a human can teach her how to handle that part of herself. Unless you want her to end up like the unstable failures of the past," the council murmured. They knew the history of half-breeds going mad. Serena's logic, however flawed, struck a chord. The girl has spirit, the elder mused, and the child is calm. Elodie was sitting quietly, drawing on a piece of parchment, completely ignoring the terrifying room. "Fine," Clarissa sneered. "If she is the guardian, let her prove it. The winter solstice ball is tomorrow night. Tradition dictates the guardian must dance the valse d'amour, the waltz of death. If she can survive a dance with the king in his current state, without him draining her dry, then we will accept her." The room went deadly silent. The waltz of death wasn't just a dance, it was a test of restraint. The vampire had to hold their partner close, surrounded by the scent of their blood, while the music drove their instincts into a frenzy. For a starving vampire like Holden, it was a death sentence for Serena. Holden stood up abruptly. "No, I will not risk her." "Then you admit you have no control?" Clarissa smiled, a shark smelling blood in the water. "Then you are unfit to rule." Serena looked at Holden. She saw the defeat in his eyes. He wouldn't risk hurting her. She reached out and took his hand. It was trembling. "We accept," Serena said. "Serena," Holden hissed. "You don't know what you're doing." "I know," she whispered back. "I'm saving your crown." The ballroom was even more extravagant than the Crimson Gala. Ice sculptures floated in the air, defying gravity. The attendees wore masks of silver and bone. Serena wore a dress Holden had provided, a stunning gown of midnight blue silk that left her neck and shoulders bare. It was beautiful, and it made her feel incredibly vulnerable. "You can back out," Holden said. He stood beside her in a tuxedo that made him look like a fallen angel. He looked worse tonight, paler, his eyes rimmed with red. The hunger was radiating off him in waves. "And let Clarissa win?" Serena adjusted his tie. "Not a chance. Just don't bite me, okay?" "It is not a joke, Serena." Holden's voice was rough. "When the music starts, the enchantment begins. It amplifies my hunger. It amplifies your scent. I might not be able to stop myself." "I trust you," Serena said, and she realized with a jolt that she meant it. The orchestra struck a discordant, haunting chord. The floor cleared. Holden took her waist. His grip was iron-hard. He pulled her flush against him. She could feel the cold radiating from his body, could feel the rapid, frantic beating of his heart. Or maybe it was hers. They began to move. The waltz was fast, dizzying. The world blurred into streaks of silver and gold. Holden moved with supernatural grace, sweeping her across the floor. But as the music swelled, Serena felt the change. Holden's breathing became ragged. His pupils dilated until his eyes were black pits. He leaned closer to her neck. She could feel his breath on her skin, cold and sharp. "Holden," she whispered. "It is too much," he groaned. His fangs descended, gleaming in the chandelier light. He was losing the battle. The beast was taking over. Clarissa, watching from the sidelines, smirked. She had won. Serena did the only thing she could think of. She didn't pull away. She pulled him closer. She moved her hand up his neck, threading her fingers into his hair, grounding him. "Look at me," she commanded softly. "Not the blood. Look at me." Holden shuddered. He forced his head up, locking eyes with her. The struggle in his face was agonizing. "I am dangerous," he rasped. "You are Elodie's father," Serena said firmly. "You are the king, and you are the man who saved my cat." A flicker of humanity sparked in the black void of his eyes. "Trust me," she whispered. Holden closed his eyes. He took a deep, shuddering breath, inhaling her scent. Not as food, but as something else. Something grounding. The music reached a crescendo. The spell peaked. Holden let out a low growl, burying his face in the curve of her neck. The crowd gasped, expecting the bite, but he didn't bite. He kissed her. It wasn't a romantic kiss. Not exactly. It was a desperate press of lips against the pulse of her throat, a reverence, a seal of protection. He inhaled her life force without taking a drop of blood. The music stopped. Holden lifted his head. His eyes were back to their violet hue, bright and clear. The greyness was gone from his skin. He looked revitalized, strong. He had fed on her trust. The room was silent. Then, slowly, the elder vampire began to clap. Clarissa's glass shattered in her hand. Holden didn't let go of Serena. He looked down at her with an expression of awe. "You broke the cycle," he murmured. The curse. It feeds on fear. You gave me none. I was terrified, Serena admitted, her knees shaking. You were brave, Holden corrected. He kissed her hand, sending a jolt of heat straight to her core. Sire! It was Redwood again, pushing through the stunned crowd. He looked rattled. What is it now? Holden asked, not taking his eyes off Serena. The dungeon, Redwood said. The prisoner. The one we caught near the wreckage site. He's talking. Holden's demeanor shifted instantly from lover to warrior. And? He says he didn't sabotage the Queen's carriage, Redwood said, his voice carrying in the silent room. He says he saw who did. Redwood looked directly at Clarissa. He says it was a woman in red. Clarissa went pale. She spun around, heading for the exit. Guards! Holden roared. But Clarissa was fast. She threw a handful of dust onto the floor. Flash powder. A blinding light erupted. By the time vision returned, the doors were swinging shut. Clarissa was gone. But she hadn't left empty-handed. A scream pierced the air. A scream that froze Serena's blood. Daddy! It came from the balcony. Holden and Serena rushed to the railing. Below, in the courtyard, a black car was screeching away. Clarissa was in the back seat, and struggling in her grip, pressing her hand against the rear window, was Elodie. Clarissa had taken the air. Holden let out a sound that wasn't human, a roar of pure, primal rage that shook the glass in the window frames. Serena gripped the stone railing, watching the tail lights fade into the night. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. She took the wrong kid, Serena said, her voice trembling with fury. Holden turned to her. His face was a mask of deadly promise. We will burn the world to get her back, he vowed. No, Serena said, turning to face the king of the night. The city blurred into streaks of neon and shadow as the royal armored SUV tore down the highway. Redwood drove with the silent precision of a machine, weaving through traffic at speeds that would have terrified Serena just 2 days ago. But terror was relative. Sitting next to a seething vampire king who had just lost his daughter made a car crash seem trivial. Holden hadn't spoken since they left the palace. He sat rigidly, his eyes fixed on the darkness outside, a phone clutched in his hand so tightly the screen had cracked. We don't know where she's going, Serena said, her voice quiet in the tense silence. She reached out, covering his white-knuckled hand with hers. But we will find her. Holden looked at her. The lethal rage in his eyes softened just enough to reveal the panic beneath. Clarissa has cloaking spells. She has been planning this for months. If she crosses the border into the wastes... She won't, Serena said firmly. She wants power, right? She wants the throne. You can't rule from the wastes. She's going somewhere significant. The girl is right, Redwood rumbled from the front seat. She needs a place of power to complete a binding ritual if she intends to take the princess's essence. Daphne, Holden breathed. We need Daphne Templeton. 20 minutes later, the SUV skidded to a halt in front of a dilapidated Victorian house on the edge of the city. The garden was overgrown with thorns that seemed to move on their own. Who is Daphne? Serena asked as they hurried up the crumbling steps. The Oracle of the Court, Holden said, kicking the door open without knocking. And the only person Clarissa fears. The inside of the house smelled of dried sage and ozone. Seated in a velvet armchair, surrounded by floating tarot cards, was a woman who looked no older than 20, but had eyes filled with centuries of boredom. You're late, Your Majesty, Daphne Templeton drawled, not looking up from her cards. I expected you 10 minutes ago. Where is she? Holden demanded, striding into the room. The air crackled around him. Daphne flicked a card into the air. It depicted a tower struck by lightning. The shattered spire, the ruins of the old cathedral. Holden went still. That ground is consecrated. It burns our kind. Exactly, Daphne said, finally looking up. Her gaze drifted to Serena. That is why she took the child there. Clarissa knows you cannot step onto holy ground without burning to ash. She plans to drain the girl's power while you watch helplessly from the perimeter. Serena stepped forward. He can't go in. But I can. Daphne's eyes narrowed. She studied Serena with intense fascination. The human anomaly. The nanny. The guardian, Holden corrected, his voice a low growl. Guardian, Daphne mused. She reached out and tapped Serena's chest, right over her heart. You have a fire in you, little mouse, but the spire is dangerous. Clarissa has surely set wards. I don't care about wards, Serena said. I care about Elodie. She's 5 years old and she's terrified. I'm going in. Daphne smiled, a slow, sharp expression. Then take this. She pulled a small vial of silver liquid from her pocket. Holy water mixed with star metal filings. If Clarissa tries to use magic on you, throw this at her feet. It won't kill her, but it will annoy her greatly. We are leaving, Holden said, grabbing Serena's arm. Thank you, Daphne. Holden, Daphne called out as they turned to leave. The playfulness was gone from her voice. The prophecy of the curse. It wasn't about blood sacrifice. Holden paused. It was about balance, Daphne whispered. Night and day. Vampire and human. You were starving because you were incomplete. You didn't just need a nanny. You needed a queen. Holden didn't answer, but his grip on Serena's hand tightened as they walked out into the night. The shattered spire stood on a jagged cliff overlooking the sea, a skeletal remain of a cathedral destroyed in the Great War. Moonlight poured through the broken roof, illuminating the stone floor where moss and ancient runes intertwined. Redwood stopped the car at the rusted iron gates. This is as far as we can go, sire. The consecrated ground starts here. Holden stepped out, his face grim. He walked to the gate and placed a hand near the metal. His skin began to smoke instantly. He hissed, pulling back. She's inside, Holden said, his voice laced with agony. I can hear her heartbeat. It's frantic. Serena looked at the looming ruins. She could see a faint red glow emanating from the center of the cathedral. I'm going, Serena said. She checked the vial in her pocket. Serena, Holden turned to her. He looked terrified. If anything happens to you, it won't, she said, trying to sound confident. I'm immune to the holy ground. I'm just a girl walking into a church. You are my heart, Holden whispered. The confession hung in the salty air, heavy and absolute. He pulled her close, kissing her forehead. If she touches you, I will burn this entire cliff into the sea, consecrated or not. Serena took a deep breath, nodded, and slipped through the gates. The walk up the path was eerie. The air was heavy with the scent of ozone and ancient magic. As she entered the main nave of the ruined cathedral, she saw them. Elodie was in the center of a glowing red circle, unconscious, floating a few inches off the ground. Clarissa stood before her, chanting in a language that sounded like grinding stones. Stop! Serena shouted, her voice echoing off the broken stone walls. Clarissa turned. Her eyes were glowing crimson. She smiled, but it was a rictus of madness. The nanny, Clarissa laughed. I wondered if Holden would send you. The coward stays outside, afraid of a little holy burn. He's not afraid, Serena said, walking closer. He's smart, and you're done, Clarissa. The council knows. Redwood knows. There's nowhere to run. I don't need to run, Clarissa sneered. She raised a dagger made of black glass. Once I consume the girl's essence, I will be a daywalker. I will be a god. Consecrated ground won't burn me. Holden won't be able to touch me. She raised the dagger over Elodie. No! Serena sprinted forward. Clarissa flicked her wrist, and a wave of invisible force slammed into Serena, knocking her backward. She hit the stone floor hard, tasting blood. "Stay down, human," Clarissa spat. "This is destiny." Serena gasped for air. She saw Elodie stir in the air, a small, pained whimper escaping her lips. That sound, the sound of a child in pain, ignited something in Serena that was fiercer than any magic. She scrambled up. She didn't run at Clarissa this time. She ran at the circle. "You can't enter!" Clarissa shrieked. "The barrier will flay you!" But Clarissa had forgotten one thing. The barrier was designed to stop vampires. It was necrotic magic mixed with blood wards. Serena was human. She plunged through the red wall of light. It felt like walking through ice water, but it didn't stop her. She grabbed Elodie's floating body and pulled her down, wrapping her arms around the child. "I've got you," Serena whispered. "I've got you." The ritual was disrupted. The red light flickered and died. Elodie woke up, screaming. "You ruined it!" Clarissa screamed. She charged at them, the dagger raised, her face contorted into a monstrous mask. Serena fumbled for the vial in her pocket. She pulled it out and smashed it on the ground between them. A cloud of silver mist exploded upward. Clarissa shrieked as the holy water and star metal hit her skin. It sizzled like acid. She stumbled back, blinded, clawing at her face. "Holden!" Serena yelled. "Now!" A roar tore through the night. The iron gates at the bottom of the path were ripped off their hinges. Holden Davenport was coming. He ignored the burning of the ground. Smoke rose from his shoes, from his skin. But he didn't slow down. He moved like a blur of vengeance. He reached the nave just as Clarissa recovered her sight. She saw him, and her eyes went wide with true fear. "Holden, wait, He didn't wait. He didn't speak. He slammed into her with the force of a freight train. They crashed through the stone wall of the cathedral, out onto the cliff edge. Clarissa dangled over the abyss, Holden's hand around her throat. His skin was blistering from the holy ground, but his grip was unbreakable. "You touched my daughter," Holden said, his voice calm, cold and final. "And you threatened my queen. She's human," Clarissa choked out. "She is my life," Holden said. He opened his hand. Clarissa fell. Her scream faded into the roar of the ocean below. Holden collapsed to his knees, his body steaming, his strength spent. "Daddy!" Elodie broke free from Serena's grip and ran to him. Serena followed, dropping to her knees beside him. His skin was red and angry, burns covering his arms and face. "You idiot!" Serena cried, tears streaming down her face. "You walked on holy ground." Holden looked up at her. He was in agony, but he was smiling. "I told you," he rasped, reaching out a burned hand to cup her cheek. "I would burn the world." The healing took time. For 3 days, the manor was silent. Daphne Templeton worked tirelessly, with poultices of moonflower and aloe, to treat the king's burns. Serena didn't leave his side. She slept in the chair next to his bed, holding his hand, waking up every hour to check his breathing. On the 4th morning, sunlight streamed through the heavy curtains, filtered, safe, but bright. Holden opened his eyes. Serena was awake instantly. "Hey, you're back." Holden sat up slowly. The burns had faded to faint, silvery scars that only added to his rugged allure. He looked at her, then at Elodie, who was asleep at the foot of the bed. "Is it over?" he asked. "Clarissa is gone," Serena said. "The council is extremely apologetic. They're calling you the unburnt king now, which is ironic considering how much aloe we used." Holden chuckled, a rusty sound. He swung his legs out of bed and stood up. He walked to the window and pulled the curtain back slightly, letting a beam of light hit his hand. It didn't burn. He looked at Serena, eyes wide. The curse. Gone. Serena smiled, standing up. Daphne said something about balance, about love breaking the cycle of necrosis. You didn't just save us, Holden. You broke the bloodline curse by sacrificing yourself for a human. Holden turned to her. He crossed the room in 2 strides and pulled her into his arms. It wasn't desperate like the waltz. It was solid, permanent. I didn't sacrifice myself for a human, he whispered against her hair. I sacrificed myself for my family. He pulled back and reached into the pocket of his bedside jacket. He pulled out a ring, a simple band of white gold with a dark sapphire. I know it is soon, Holden said, looking suddenly shy, and I know I come with a lot of baggage, a castle, a vampire court, a traumatized child. And a cat, Serena added. Don't forget mittens. And a cat, Holden agreed. Serena Marston, you walked into the dark for us. Will you stay in the light with us? Will you be my queen? Serena looked at the ring, then at the sleeping little girl who finally looked peaceful, and then at the monster who had learned to love. Only if I can change the dress code, she said, tears prickling her eyes. Less velvet, more denim. Done. Holden kissed her. The door creaked open. Elodie sat up, rubbing her eyes. She saw them hugging, and a massive grin split her face. Are you Mummy now? She asked, sleepy. Serena laughed, picking the girl up and sandwiching her between them. Yeah, sweetie, Serena said, kissing her forehead. I think I am. The coronation of Serena Marston, the first human queen of the vampire dominion, was an event that changed history. They say the stained glass windows of the great hall vibrated with the cheers of both humans and vampires. The fear that had gripped the court for centuries evaporated, replaced by a new era of understanding. Serena never did wear the heavy crown. She preferred a simple circlet of silver flowers, and every night, before the king went to council, he would sit in the nursery with his wife and daughter, listening to stories about spiders in rain boots, feeding on the only thing that truly sustained him: love. Holden Davenport had been a king of the night, ruling over shadows. But as he looked at his patchwork family, a human, a vampire, and a little girl who finally slept through the night, he knew he had found something far more powerful. He had found his dawn. Enjoyed this story? If Serena and Holden's journey from fear to forever captured your heart, please like this story and share it with fellow romance lovers. Don't forget to subscribe for more tales of forbidden love, magical twists, and happily ever afters that defy the odds. Let us know in the comments. Would you have walked into the haunted cathedral?